Hi, everybody, and welcome to a monstrous edition. Is that okay? Is that too on the nose? Is that all right?
That's perfect.
Great, great. A monstrous edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am very glad to be on this episode to be talking with writer, editor, creator, showrunner, James Aquilone. James, thank you for jumping in. Thank you for taking some time.
Thank you, Jason, for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. You are the owner of Monstrous Books, the writer of several books. I'm guessing romantic comedies. Zombie Detective, Dead
Pretty
Jack is
close.
it? Oh, what did you say? I'm sorry.
I said it's pretty close.
Okay, great, great. I try, I try. And you are also an editor, and I'll mention the Kolchak uh, Night Stalker 50th anniversary being one of those. Bram Stoker Award winner. And
Yeah.
so you've done some impressive work in the world of storytelling, comics, and sharing narratives. So much appreciation there to start out with.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I've been just thinking like I so many things have happened this year that I've like I did this happen this year? I was like it seemed like it was like 5 years ago, but so much was crammed in into just this year. So we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, yeah. A nice, impressive run of work, and I know I've talked with creators. I think maybe DJ Kirkbride, at least being one of the folks that I think has named you and noted your work. I'm curious about what comics allow you to do. What is it about comics that draws you in, and what do they allow you to do creatively?
Well, I've always been obsessed with books, and it really started with comics since I was like a little baby. So that was my thing when I was a kid. I grew up in the 70s. So, it was all about like Star Wars and Superman the movie. So, when I watched a lot of the old Adam West Batman. So I
Hmm.
love superheroes. So I love comics. So that was really my first, that was my introduction into like the world of books. So, so I always wanted to get into comics, but getting into comics is pretty difficult. So I just figured I'd just do it on my own. So that
Hmm.
was my way of getting into it. Just, I'll just fund it and do it. Uh, but comics is just, yeah, you know, I mean, I do a lot of prose books
Hmm. Hmm.
and things, but I do think comics are the best. It's the best storytelling medium, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
um, because it's just that beautiful blend of the visual and the prose. So you have the text and you have the illustrations. Um, and I love that, unlike a movie, you can hold a comic book in your hand, you can own it, and
Hmm.
that's what I always loved about books. I probably even love books more than reading them. I just love having them. When I was a kid, I used to just love stacking them up and counting how many books I had and wanting, to get more books. So comics was just this, it's also a way to tell, more visual stories, obviously, than in prose. And comics allowed me to also work with a lot of amazing comic book creators.
Hmm.
Even just
Hmm.
doing Kolchak, I got to work with Steve Niles and Rodney Barnes and Kim Newman and David Avalone and all these
Yeah.
amazing artists. So that's a lot of fun. And comics too is just very collaborative,
Yeah.
which if you're a novelist, it could be very lonely and it's just you on the keyboard. But with comics, there's a whole team. So you're working with the artist, you're working with the letterer, you're working with the colorist, you're working with a writer if you're doing anthology and stuff. So
Hmm.
this whole process of putting out together a comic, that's just a lot of fun, and you get to work with so many people. So that's really what I find working with comics just be such a just a beautiful like collaboration. And so far all the collaborations have worked out and they have been good in that I haven't worked with any like divas or anything. Everyone's been like really amazing to work with. So that's really what I love about comics.
Love it, love it. And I love to hear about both collaboration and positive collaborations, positive experiences. You mentioned working in prose, so I'm curious, uh, talking about being the only person that sort of working on the page. What is it like for you to kind of think in terms of writing from prose and then making that move into comics and sort of back and forth?
Well, I've been finding it lately a lot easier to work with the comics because you can finish a comic script
Hmm.
pretty quickly, especially since I've been writing shorter comics. So it comes to me much easier comics because I think visually. So doing a comic script for me is a lot quicker. So doing something in prose is it's more painstaking. Right now I'm trying to finish a short story that's been due for like a month, and it's just
Hmm.
been like really difficult, and it's just been like pulling teeth. But it's coming out well. But it's just for me the prose has always been a little more difficult to put it all together, and um and when I've written comic scripts, they just always have come much quicker and a lot easier. So it is I would be much more prolific in comics if I just dedicated my life to that than to doing prose. But prose for me it's much more painstaking and slow process.
Yeah, yeah. Also curious about the role you play as editor and the way you approach editing and sort of working with talent as well.
Um, well, that's kind of how things started for me was through editing because for I mean I started publishing short stories about 10, 11 years ago.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I was just doing that. I wasn't editing in fiction. I mean, my day job, I'm an editor as well, but in journalism. So that's what I've been doing for like over 20 years now. I just edit, edit, edit.
Hmm.
So, but for the first 10 years, so I was just writing, and uh, not that it didn't do, I didn't do well, but I certainly didn't make a name for myself. So, but a big part of that's because you're doing that alone,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
once you start then to edit and you start putting together anthologies, now all of a sudden you're working with all these people. And
Yeah.
then it was much easier to become part of like the writing community and the horror community than when I started doing anthologies because now I was working with a lot of people. And then when I've gotten up to like say my third anthology, I've worked with like about 100 writers at that
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
So then all of a sudden now I'm known in the community because I'm editing these books. Whereas if I was just writing my own stuff, it would be very hard to get it's very hard to get your name out there. Uh,
Hmm.
those books have to then be very successful and it has to get like a lot of press. And for me, that was very difficult to kind of just to be like somebody who's known. But then when I started
Hmm.
editing, that became a lot easier because you get to work with so many people and then you're in contact with so many of the writers and artists too. So that has been just a wonderful thing. It was to start editing and then to kind of be part of the community, which I felt like I wasn't really too much of a part of it before that.
Yeah, yeah. But I was going to ask about milestones. So it sounds like that move from writing to editing in the world of comics was a big one. And any other milestones that you'd like to point to, as well as space to shout out any collaborators?
Well, most of this stuff has happened now in just the last 2 years, 2.5 years. So this has just been uh incredible. I've been working with Joe Lansdale. I worked on with him, who's
Hmm. Hmm.
like for me, like one of my favorite writers and like a writing hero. So he's been in almost all of my projects so far. He wasn't in Cold Check, but he was in I think everything else. So that was amazing
Hmm.
to work with him. And I mean working with everybody. I mean Jonathan Mayberry's been in so many of my projects and like Lisa Morton. Um, but yeah, I mean, now I'm looking at it and there's a ton of I work with almost everybody, I think, in the horror writing community at this point. David Avallone's been great to work with, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of artists who I've befriended, and like J.K. Woodward, who's now worked on a lot of my projects.
Hmm.
So I feel like I made a lot of friends as well, and colleagues and just collaborators. Um, so it's been incredible just the last couple of years to work with. I would say well over 100 writers and artists. But that yeah, I would say like that's been huge.
Hmm.
Winning the Stoker was a huge milestone.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
the Kickstarters have done way better than I ever thought. just my personal projects alone, I I've earned over a quarter of $1 million from my project since 2001. And now I started
Impressive.
managing other people's campaigns. And I raised well, I didn't raise, but I've helped to raise, I think, like over $600,000
Wow.
this year alone. Yeah, we just did I just helped manage a campaign with comic book with Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones. They're
Hmm.
doing
hmm They
Draft
were
Kit.
on the podcast. That's right. Yeah.
Well, then,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, great. Then they told you about it. Yeah, so that and then
hmm
they raised like $260,000, and that's a really amazing book. But it's
Yeah.
gonna be a series too, so it's gonna be four of them.
hmm
So that was really happy to be part of that. So and then I think right before that I did the Kickstarter for Deathgasm 2, a
hmm
movie, and they raised over $300,000. So I've been very lucky in that my personal Kickstarters were successful. So now people are now reaching out to me to help them with their Kickstarters. So hopefully I can transition to that and
Yeah.
do more of that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. Well, with that in mind, if folks want to get in touch, particular web spaces or social media spaces or anything like that that you'd like to share.
You can go to monstrousbooks.com, and I think most of the my social media links are there. But you can find me too on Twitter under Monstrous Books. There's a Monstrous Books Facebook group,
Mm,
and you can find me wherever just on the James Aquilone. I think I'm the only James Aquilone out there.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Creative visions moving forward.
oh boy, I mean next year is going to be super busy. There are a lot of Kickstarters I have lined up. I don't know if I can talk about a lot of them. There's
Oh
actually
yes, please don't talk about anything that you can't, but but anything that you can, you're certainly welcome to.
I'm trying to think of what well I just well I'm right now I'm doing the fulfillment for Dead Detective Society, which is
Mhm,
an anthology of supernatural detective stories. Half of the book are characters that people will already probably be familiar with because the characters have already been in a bunch of novels and short stories. Like we have Kevin J. Anderson's Dan Shamble character, and Nancy A. Collins's Sonia Blue, Steve
mhm,
Niles, Cal McDonald. So the idea was to get those already established detectives and put them in one book all together, and then have people also bring in new detectives.
mhm, mhm.
And we did a Kickstarter for that in the summer. And right now I'm mailing out all the books.
Love it,
But
love it.
the book will probably be available to the public early next year.
Mhm,
And with that Kickstarter, I did a magazine called Monstrous #1, and that's like it's a comic book slash magazine. So we have about it's 40 pages, 20 of them are comics. The other 20 pages we have some short stories in there and articles. I have a Dead Jack short comic in there, and Nancy Collins also did a story. So hopefully I'm going to publish maybe 2 or 3 issues of the magazine every year.
mhm,
It'll
mhm.
also be hopefully available early next year.
Great, great. Well, also people that I love, Nancy Collins, wonderful person to talk with, and of course I appreciate Steve Niles, Kevin J. Anderson, so fantastic creatives.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I've been really lucky to be working with some of the biggest writers out there, and they're really cool people too. So like that's why I keep working with them. So that's been really just cool to meet them, and that they're cool. And say, all right, that's I'm just happy that these products have been successful, so we can keep doing that and keep working with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I promised you a brief talk. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to mention before we close out?
No, I think that's everything. Like I said, there will be a lot more projects next year, but a lot of them I can't talk about. Oh, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think when I talk with some folks, they have like a board up and they're like, I can talk about this. This is still in the NDA land, and this I can't. So it's kind of interesting.
yeah, there should be a Kickstarter that I'm managing Coming soon that they'll start promoting, and it's in a horror anthology, but it's really huge. I mean, like
Awesome.
some of the biggest names that you can think of are involved in this thing, and it's going to be really big. And yeah, I think any week now we should be start promoting that.
Cool, cool. I'll be looking for it.
It definitely that's going to be something that thing's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, fantastic, and glad to have you back anytime to talk about it, to talk about upcoming things. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and the creativity that you're putting out into the world.
Thanks so much, Jason. This was a lot of fun, and I get it nice and short and sweet.
Oh yes, yeah, that's what we aim for. That's what we aim for. So
Perfect.
much appreciated.